Welcome to the Yoruba History channel. This is a channel that will deal with many issues on Yoruba history, both in the past, the present, and reflections on the future. I have with me here today an erudite scholar, a professor of history, retired from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria, and the author of the history of the Yoruba people, Professor Adebanji Akintoye, who was also a very active member of the Action Group in the First Republic and also a member of the Committee of Friends that eventually metamorphosed into the Unity Party of Nigeria. He was actually the Assistant National Secretary of the Unity Party of Nigeria at that time. And he was also a senator representing the UPN from Ekiti State, now known as Ekiti State, in the Second Republic, before it was aborted. He's retired and is happily here with us to give us his perspectives, historical and contemporary perspectives on Yoruba history. I also have with me Professor Adeniran, who is a professor of mathematics at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And he's also the headmaster of the Yoruba school. So he is a very versatile Yoruba activist, having served as the president of Egbe Yoruba in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the program, Mr. Before we proceed, Professor Akintoye, do you have anything to say, a word or two?
Yeah, I'm glad that we are doing this. I think it will be useful to the Yoruba people, it will be useful to Nigeria, it will be useful to Africa, especially in the debate that is going on in Nigeria today. A program like this will be enormously useful. So I'm glad that we are doing it.
Thank you. Professor Adeboye, do you have anything to say?
Well, I'm also very happy that we are doing what we are doing. It's about time that kinds of arrangements that lend themselves to public education in other lands are also available to our people at home. So we hope this is the beginning of something really sizable.
Now, my first question is this. There are various theories that many of our ethnic groups or nations in Nigeria are from the Middle East. How much truth is in this?
Well, these are theories that have arisen since the late 19th century to explain the origins of West African peoples in general, not only Yoruba, not only Nigerian peoples. When the first West African became Western educated and literate in the 19th century, they naturally wanted to write the history of their peoples. And they were living in a world in which the white men were conquering Africa and were saying that the black man was capable of developing any culture, any civilization. And so they wanted to show that that was not true. So, and everybody knew about the civilizations of the Middle East, of ancient Egypt, of Islamic Arabia, of the Jews, and so on. So, not surprisingly, a lot of the educated West Africans of the time began to claim, oh, we are not barbarians, we are from Egypt, or from, we are part of the Jews, or we are part of the, and then they began to point to cultural similarities between their peoples and various peoples of the Middle East. Some people say the Yoruba are Jews, some say no, they are Arabs from Arabia, from Islamic Arabia, or some people say that the Igbos are Jews, and look at certain things in their culture, so similar to the Jews, and so on. That's how it started. And then when the white man finally looked at it, they liked it. They liked it. Why? Because it confirmed what they were saying. That on your own, you peoples of West Africa, you could not possibly have developed any civilization. So any sign of civilization that we see among you is an importation from the Middle East, from other peoples who are not black from the Middle East. So that's how all these theories of that we originated from the Middle East. The Igbos are now making a lot of noise, which is a pity, because a great deal of research has been done by historians, my contemporaries, about the origins of the Igbo people. The Igbos are not Jews. The Yorubas are not Jews. Yorubas are not Arabs. The Akan in Ghana are not Arabs. Where we grew up, we developed and grew up as nations where we live now.
Okay. Professor Adeboye, some people are saying these days that the whole world, what the whole world calls nations, is not applicable to the ethnic groups of Nigeria. The implication of that, of course, is that there's nothing like a Yoruba nation or an Igbo nation or an Edo nation. What is your perception on that?
Of course, English is not our native tongue. We use it, and unfortunately we abuse it. The word nation and the word tribe and the word ethnic group are almost synonyms in the English dictionary. However, they have different emotive content. To talk about a nation, in my mind, as opposed to an ethnic group, I will use an example. Yoruba is a nation. Ijebu is an ethnic group within the Yoruba nation. Ekiti is an ethnic group within the Yoruba nation. Yoruba language is a language. The Egba version of it is a dialect of the Yoruba language. Any time that we allow France to be a nation, and there are more Yoruba than there are French, and the culture that the Yoruba established in their home of governance, the history of their attempts to govern themselves and to construct industries and technologies and what have you, is parallel to anything we call a nation on our globe. It is the constant insult of the black race to categorize whatever they have as inferior to what other people have. The idiocy in Nigeria is that since we tried to create a country out of very many nations, and since they use the word nation as an instrument for whipping us together, we have bought it. We have bought it, and we have bought it so foolishly, because in England today, in Great Britain today, everybody realizes that the Scots are a nation, the Irish are a nation, the Welsh are a nation, and but they all have British citizenship. So there's nothing wrong with having Nigerian citizenship and Yoruba nationalism. Idiocy is the rest of the statement and the abuse of the English language.
Okay, thank you. This brings into another question on the word Yoruba, because you keep saying Yoruba, Yoruba, Yoruba. There's a lot of hoopla about the name Yoruba. Professor Akintoye, can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah, people talk a lot of non-Yoruba politicians and some intellectuals, happily not all, some intellectuals, make a lot of noise about, Yoruba being something that the Yoruba people pick up in modern times. The name, they have not always been Yoruba and so on. There is no people anywhere in the world who have always been the name they bear today. There is no such people anywhere on earth. Each nationality grew up in their area and they somehow acquire a name. Quite often, the name that you bear and you are saying we are English or Saxons or French today, or is given to you by your neighbors. Sometimes, quite often, it is a name of abuse. You are doing something around among you there. You don't have a name. We know that we are different from you. We speak a different language. We live differently. You are a different people. and there is something that you do there that we find ridiculous or funny, so we give you that name from that thing, and gradually it becomes your name. That a lot of the names in the world arrive like that, So the name Yoruba is just one such name for a people. We are not sure, there are no people in the world who can tell you categorically our name came from so thing, because a name is just a word. Somebody began to apply it to you. So okay, the Angles, the English, where does the name come from? Where did it come from? They don't know. The Saxons, where did it come from? Somebody called them so, and so they are so. That's the way it is in the world. And so there is no difference between the name Yoruba, the way the name Yoruba arose, and the way the name of any other people. Who first called the Hausas Hausa? Who first called the Fulani Fulani? We don't know. So why are you asking that in the case of the Yoruba people, we must prove that our origins in so place? But according to the traditions of the Yoruba, it seems as if the first Yoruba people, even long before the founding of Ife, the first Yoruba people who used to go away and trade in faraway places where they could take advantage of the transatlantic trade, in places like Gao, in modern Mali, were the people who were first called Yoruba. The people who met them there, the Berbers who came across the Sahara, the other peoples of the Nile Valley, and so on. And then the Arabs joined later, after the Arabs joined in the trade. That's where the name Yoruba arose. So it is not it's a language of one of those peoples. We don't know which people there. And what does it mean? We don't know. But there is an old man whom I interviewed in 1964 who told me that he thinks that among the people who used to meet there, it is they who began to call us Yoruba. And he thinks it means, because the fact of life at that time is that we who went to trade in those places were people from very far distant forest country in the south. We are talking of Gao on the upper Niger. And so our people traveled all the way there through the Bariba country along the Niger Valley to go and trade there. So when we arrived there, we are looked at as people who have come from a distant forest country in the south. So probably the name means these people from the far distant forests of the south, probably. We don't know. So it's a possibility that that's what it means. So we don't know, but we know that they started to call us Yoruba there. And the first person who first wrote the name down in black and white is an Islamic scholar called Ahmed Baba, who wrote a book in 1516 in the Songhai Empire on the upper Niger there. Who wrote a book in 1516 in which he called us Yoruba. So that's the first written mention of the name Yoruba in all of human history. So it's a name obviously that existed before the time of Ahmed Baba. A name that existed before his time. And as this old man that I interviewed, the old man is Oba Adekansola, the Olobag of Obagun, near Ikirun. It's a small town called Obagun. There was an old man at the time that I was interviewing him in 1963-64, who had traveled in Yoruba land, who had done a lot of, who knew a lot of Yoruba tradition, a lot of the Yoruba country. And I went to interview him because I was doing research in Yoruba history at the time. And he told me, yeah, that's our name. That's the name our neighbors call. It is the neighbors who give names to nations. It's not the nations themselves who give names to themselves. Usually it is the neighbors who give you a name. He said that's the name that these distant neighbors gave us. And then the name that then came home with the traders. So that we began to call ourselves
what they called us.
Yeah, we began to call ourselves what they called us.
But,
that is it.
Okay, one quick question because of time. If that is the case, does that mean, or did that mean we had no self-identification of ourselves? What do we call ourselves?
We had
What did we call
we had identification. Most peoples in the world don't call themselves anything at the beginning. All we know is that we are one people. The Yoruba man from as far as Ketu, he knew that if he traveled all the way as far as Kaba, he would understand the language. He knows that the moment he crosses the boundary and comes to the land of the Nupe, he doesn't understand the language anymore. So he knows his own people by identification. It's easy. You understand? So that's how nations existed. But later, when some people gave us a name, then we began to bear the name. And we are not under any obligation to anybody to prove that, we have been bearing this name from eternity. And so there is no such thing. There is no people in Nigeria who have borne their own name from eternity. At some point, some people began to call you Hausa, and you are Hausa. We call the Nupe Tapa. That's Yoruba people giving the Nupe the name Tapa. You understand? Yeah. And that is it. If it had not been, the Hausa people and the Igbo were not too open to one another until the British came, and then the Hausa began to call the Igbo Nyamuri. If it had been ancient times, the name Nyamuri could have become the name of the Igbo people easily. So that's it. Usually your neighbors begin to ridicule you with a name, and the name then becomes your name.
Yeah, actually, in support of that, we used to call the Igbo people Igbo until the Igbo people themselves
tell us that we are not Igbo, they are Igbo.
They are Igbo.
Yes.
So that sort of proves that go ahead. You have something to say.
I have a couple of things to say. I hope I remember. Talking about Igbo, on the internet, a young and very aggressive contributor said recently that in the Kwani, they call the people of Eastern region Igbo because Igbo in the Kwani language means slave. So now, if Igbo say they are Igbo and the Kwani say, well, we call you so because you are slaves, you can see that the names people call themselves or are called is not always complimentary.
No.
Now, two, let us go on a short journey to the planet. The name Japan was given to that country by China. It's called the Palm, and it means the land of the rising sun. No matter what animals exist between Japan and China today, Japan bears the name that China gave it.
Yeah. And rising sun because Japan, a series of islands on the coast of China.
On the coast of China.
So that they on the eastern coast of China.
All right.
So they can see the sun rising over those islands.
The land of the rising sun.
That's all.
Now, a rose is a rose is a rose. No matter who gave Yoruba the name that they answer, no matter whether they give themselves or they got it from somewhere or whatever, we know who we are talking about when we say Yoruba.
We know ourselves.
And that's all we care about.
That's all.
Now, the prof was talking about the situations in Europe. The Angles and the Saxons were Germanic people who moved into Celtic lands to conquer them.
Yeah.
And by the time that William the Conqueror in 1066, the Battle of Hastings, moved in 1066, they changed a little bit. Today, the Franks, the German Franks, who settled in what is now called France, gave France its name.
Yeah.
The people who used to live in there were Gauls. I don't know how they got the name Gauls, but they were Celtic people. So, what does it matter? It is what we call Alaini Kanshi, who will worry too much about how a name got to be a name. The people that the name describes are very definite, and whether you define it in the language or Germanic language or whatever, you know what you're talking about. That's what's important.
Thank you for, because of our time, this will be the end of the first session, and we hope we'll see you next week to continue the discussion. Thank you very much, and we are very enlightened.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it time for water?
So
So, how was it?